So there I was, staggering out of Mactan Airport, Cebu, the Philippines, being stared at by all the locals as if I had multimillionaire status after having spent the best part of 2 days traveling. The end result of over 3 years of meticulous planning, preparation, and research, I had arrived in this strangely exotic, unfamiliar place to broaden my horizons in search of a new life. I was exhausted, disorientated, and very hungry. The first thing that I noticed was a distinct, unique, pungent aroma in the air, almost like a damp jungle. A cloak of damp heat wrapped itself around me. The humidity was so high I could almost swish the air with my hand. I grabbed the first taxi I could find and headed straight to my Airbnb condo in the city. On the journey, I noticed hundreds of scooters weaving in and out of the traffic with total disregard for safety of any kind, almost treating a red light as if it was a green. Everything was completely different. Streets, buildings, people, brightly colored Geelys, which are modified military vehicles left behind by the US, which are now used to ferry locals around like low-cost buses. There was absolutely no doubt that I was in a third world country, a developing nation, as we drove past beggars on virtually every street corner. It was at this point that I heard my own mind ask me, "What have you done? What have you done?" I remember waking up the very first morning in my condo in IT Park, Cebu. I slid open the balcony door and immediately felt that damp cloak of air wrap itself around me again. The roar of the city was somewhat intimidating. I needed to find clean water, some supplies, food, etc. And as I sat there contemplating the itinerary of the day, that's when it hit me. I was in a different world. The comfortable daily routine where everything was familiar day after week after month after year was gone. I was halfway around the world and was beginning to feel the reality of the move that I've made. I had no concern about the move itself or the place. In fact, I was quite relaxed about that part because of my preparation. But what made it all the more difficult was that 2 days prior, I'd come straight from the family home to this. In most situations where guys are flying into a country in Asia like the Philippines or Thailand, for a new life, there has been maybe a divorce or something, there has usually been a period of separation which has allowed them to process the situation that they've gone through and to the new circumstances that they find themselves in their home country, and then spend an amount of time planning for a move to another country. Maybe at least a few weeks, months, or even years to adjust to the change in their life and allow them to move on before moving away. With me, however, it had been only 2 days. I felt this invisible curtain had come down and severed all comfortable familiarity of family life, social life, and everything else. Back in the UK in the weeks leading up to my departure, I had what I would call pre-processed the fact that there might be an initial period of time where I might find it a little difficult to adjust to the reality that all those things were now no longer a part of my life in Asia. However, in all honesty, I'd underestimated the impact of this. From the very first morning, it was almost like being punched in the stomach with a psychological baseball bat. The impact of the realization that I was in a totally different environment with virtually no connection to the things that I was used to was overwhelming. I was enveloped in a sense of deep regret for all the times that I became grumpy or irritated by things that really could have just been brushed off as no big deal. Times when an argument may have been started over trivial things. Times when a family walk had been suggested on a weekend and I'd just dismissed it because it was too cloudy or any other excuse I could think of. There is a social stigma attached to a man who admits to being emotionally stirred in some way to the point where it makes him tear up, even though it's a natural biological way of expelling negative energy. But I'm not going to lie, the first hour of every morning for the first 2 or 3 weeks, the same thing happened. These deep emotional pulls had to be processed in a proper way and put into their correct places before I was going to start to enjoy this experience. Otherwise, you're carrying a big black cloud around with you that just gets in the way of everything. It can literally be any issue from having an elderly mother who isn't in the best of health, missing your kids, or maybe it's the first time that you've been properly on your own in a long time. I place high importance on having a crystal clear mindset and a razor sharp focus, which can slice through anything and carry you through almost any situation. But sometimes when moving to another country and everything is completely unfamiliar, you need to be aware that there may be some things that you haven't got closure on or haven't processed properly. So it's always wise to have a good look around in your emotional life and be clear about those family ties and how the dynamics of those things could change when you're halfway around the world. It's not just a couple of hours car journey and you're there. So make sure everything is in good order. Clean your mind, and if there are apologies that need to be made, make them. Heart-to-heart conversations, have them. When you're embarking on a move of this kind, it's best that you are at peace with things as much as you can be. When I arrived the previous evening, I'd become acquainted with a group of American expats who had been friendly enough to welcome me into their conversation and offered to take me under their wing and show me around the place. I was very grateful to have this connection, and I got to know these guys really quite well over the following months. They used the lobby of the condo residence as a meeting place to just sit and hang out and chill. On day 6, 2 of the group invited me out to a club 10 minutes just up the road called G-Spot. And as we walked in, there was a Philippine couple, early 20s. Their friend, a Filipina, sat at the table with them. We got a drink and we sat down next to them. It took less than maybe a couple of minutes to get into conversation. The first Filipina was with her boyfriend, a young Filipino, who were chatting with the guys I was with, but it was her petite friend that caught my eye. I didn't waste any time. She was gorgeous, long dark wavy hair, dark morena skin, and a slinky little dress about as exotic and sexy as you can get. She was 23 years old, studying psychology at Cebu University, and from the province. Perfect. Within minutes, we were in deep conversation. She was caressing my knee with her fingers, and we were getting physically closer, almost cheek to cheek. The guys I was with gave me the nod. They were going downstairs to give us some privacy. Okay. As they walked past, one of them whispered, "It's a done deal. You're in there, buddy." And as I sat there staring into the eyes of this beauty, I remember specifically thinking to myself, this is it. This is what men from around the world fly in on those planes 24/7 that I watch through my condo balcony window. This is what all the vloggers have been talking about. This is what I fantasized about in my mind. And now I'm actually in this very situation. "Where are you staying?" she asked. I gave her the name of the condo residence. "How far is it?" she asked. I replied, 5-10 minutes walk. "Why?" "Where have your friends gone?" she asked. "Oh, they're just doing their own thing tonight, I think." "So it's just you and me," she said, with bedroom eyes. However, unbeknown to me, there was another dynamic in play here. The Americans told me later that they'd noticed that the other Filipina who was with her boyfriend was giving me more attention than her boyfriend. Apparently, the girlfriend was getting jealous of the attention that I was giving her friend and was making it very clear to her friend that she wasn't happy about it by signaling walking fingers that she was going to leave every 5-10 minutes. Unaware of this, I was moments away from taking the situation to the next level before that little voice in my head kicked in and said, "Let's just find out what's the situation here. What am I dealing with? Let's ask some intelligent questions." So I asked her about her experiences with previous relationships and foreigners, and the whole thing began to unravel. After dating several Filipinos, she had started a relationship with a 29-year-old American who had gone on to cheat on her, as they do at that age when they realize how high up the value ladder they are in a country like the Philippines. They're like a kid in a candy store and the temptation is just too much. When that fell, she then bounced from him onto another Westerner who was 78 years old. And from what I understand, it was more of a financial transaction than anything else. Now, whilst I have absolutely no problem with a young girl looking to better herself through education and being resourceful enough to find ways of funding it, when you're living in a $30 a month boarding house room with no window, sharing with half a dozen people, you've got to do what you've got to do. And it was at this point that alarm bells were ringing and red flags were starting to appear. You see, I have a rule, and it says I will never date a girl in Asia that's been with a Westerner, and for a very good reason. Their experience usually ended badly and as a result of mistreatment of some kind or taking advantage of either sexually, emotionally, or otherwise, which has left them scarred in some way, and the fallout lands on the next guy that comes along, which can create all kinds of drama and unwanted problems. In the end, I decided not to take it any further or ask for her number. I was still going through my initial adjustment period, dealing with other things, and did not need any kind of drama to add to it. I pride myself on having a crystal clear mindset with a razor sharp focus, and this certainly put me to the test, much to the disbelief of the guys that I was with, who just couldn't believe the opportunity that I'd let slip through my fingers. Nonetheless, I wasn't about to start explaining myself. When my gut instinct screams loud enough, I listen to it. To be honest, the last thing I needed was my focus and attention to be divided by myself and another person and their needs and wants. For the first month, you're in survival mode, and you need all your attention on yourself. The thought of having a young Filipina hanging around my neck at this point, vying for my attention, didn't appeal to me right now. It's quite simple. Get yourself right and everything else will follow. I found myself in a similar situation a few days later on day 10 when another American suggested to me that we should go to an American sports bar called The Social, which is on the 4th floor of Ayala Business Park in Cebu. Unbeknown to me, he had dined there a couple of days before and had struck up conversation with two Filipinas and told them that there was a new guy in town from the UK. On this particular evening before I arrived, he messaged them to join us. When they turned up, one of them was 25, maybe average looking, and the other was 22, much more petite and quiet, which I liked. But in my view, they were the lower hanging fruit. A similar scenario occurred here, where the 25-year-old was interested in me, but I wasn't in her. And halfway through the meal, I pulled out my phone and gave the younger one my number, much to the disgust of the older one, which caused an uncomfortable situation between the girls, which I actually found quite amusing, as they argued with each other in their native tongue. The two of them were sharing a boarding house, and there was no way in the world that the older one was going to allow the younger one to date me and potentially end up bagging a foreigner. What put me off about this situation was the fact that both of them were regularly hanging out at places where Westerners are. But if I'm being really honest, I was looking for fruit a little higher up the tree, the kind of girl that never even considered maybe dating a Westerner until the moment that I walk into her life. The younger one would have made a fantastic Miss Right now, but neither were ever going to be Miss Right. On day 3, I'd been chatting to a girl online, 22, province girl, and we video called. We seemed to get on and she was actually quite pretty. I said maybe sometime we can go for a coffee. So I decided to ask her where she was. Now it turns out that she was in the province about an hour and a half away from Cebu City. And to my surprise, she told me that she was quite happy to hop on the back of a scooter and her friend would drive her all the way to me to meet me for a coffee at Starbucks in IT Park. I couldn't believe that she was prepared to do this just for a coffee, but I told her it's a bit too far for that. I was even more surprised when she absolutely insisted it was no problem, to which I replied, look, what if we meet each other and within 5 minutes we don't like each other? To which she responded, God, don't be so negative. I made another excuse and left it. Do I look back on those opportunities with regret? You damn well bet I do. Well, the lower half of me does anyway, the upper part of me doesn't. Perhaps he had something to do with a conversation I had had on day 2 with a Canadian guy in his early 50s, ex-military, and had served in Iraq, who was having dinner at Mercado IT Park on the second day. I just bought some food and was looking for somewhere to sit. I spotted a Westerner and asked him if I could join him for 10 minutes or so while I had my food. And he kindly agreed, and then we got chatting. Now, it turns out that he's been coming to the Philippines on and off for over 12 years. After 5 minutes or so, his girlfriend sat down with us, who just got her food as well, and she was a pretty little thing, about 30 years his junior. He continued and gave me some sound advice, which was the following. Try not to spend more than 1,000 pesos a day, which is around $18, which was fine, I wasn't. He also said that despite what you may hear and see on social media about the Philippine people being some of the friendliest people on the planet, there's just as many that aren't, and most will lie endlessly to get what they want from you, and I have to agree with some of that. But on average, I found the Philippine people to be welcoming, friendly, and curiously interesting. And finally, in respect of dating, he warned us scenarios that his military comrades had experienced, leaving a couple of them traumatized, like the one I've just explained, where a girl is prepared to come from deep province just for a coffee. She arrives and things move very quickly, back to your place or a hotel room, and then just when you're about to get down to business, there's a knock on the door and you find yourself surrounded by 2 brothers and 3 uncles, who then give you the kicking of your life before making off with your valuables. Perhaps it was this at the back of my mind, who knows? The point I'm trying to make here is that no matter where you are on the value ladder, your looks, your age, your personality, your finances, in this land called Asia, whether it's the Philippines or Thailand or Vietnam or any of the other countries over here, you have one thing available to you that you may not have in the West. That one thing that without it can be demoralizing, even soul-destroying for a man. Options. You have options. More of them and a better quality. That's really all a man needs to hear. Just tell me I've got some bloody options. Well, out here, you have. You can't do much about the cards that you've been dealt in life, but what you can do is be as intelligent and skillful as possible in how you play those cards. I'm a firm believer that we live and die by our own swords, we create our own luck, and we have to lay in the bed that we make for ourselves. The good news is that over here, you can take your time. You can be selective. You don't have to settle. You don't have to lead with money, but you do have to be accountable for the way you conduct yourself, the decisions you make, and the women you entertain. Perhaps it was that at the back of my mind when I made those decisions, but I'm glad I did, because not long after, my thirst was quenched in a way I could never have expected. But we'll get into that next time. Just remember, over here, you have options, and that's all you need to know.